MAGA Republican Congressman, top Trump ally, and literally the least productive member of Congress, Jim Jordan, was pressed in a heated interview about whether Donald Trump will concede the election if he loses, and it went as disastrously as you might expect. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we haven't talked about Jim Jordan in a minute. Many of you were no doubt blissfully at peace with that decision. And yet the election is rapidly approaching. Jim Jordan is a top MAGA Republican in Congress. And if we don't flip the House back to Democratic control, he will continue to be a top Republican. And of course, there's a possibility that his cult leader, Donald Trump, will become president of the United States and Republicans will take the Senate. There's a very real possibility of a Republican trifecta, in which case Jim Jordan's unhinged views would become even more powerful. I should also note that Jim Jordan was an election denier. He facilitated Donald Trump's big lie. He, contributed to schemes by Trump and MAGA Republicans to steal the 2020 election. So with all this in mind, Dan Abrams of News Nation pressed Jim Jordan about what happens if Trump loses. We're going to play this clip and unpack it together.
Pointing in that direction. So I think that is exactly the case. Heck yeah, let's make sure we certify President Trump as the president because he's going to win, for goodness sake.
But if Trump loses, will you tell him to concede?
Well, he's not going to lose.
But if he loses, he might lose.
And if he loses, he will concede like he did last time.
He didn't concede.
Power
he never
was
conceded.
Turned over last time, for goodness sake. That's how it works. And President Trump did that. He left the White House. Joe Biden came in, and we've had 3.5 years of ridiculous, crazy policy that has led to $2 gas going to $4 gas, stable prices going to record inflation, secure border going to a no border, and of course, all kinds of, safe streets going to record levels of crime. That's what we got under Joe Biden. But President Trump left the White House and we got Joe Biden in there, and everyone sees how bad it went. And that's why President Trump is winning and surging in all the metrics and all the measurements.
But I'm going to try one more time on that question. If he loses, are you going to tell him to concede?
Well, if he loses, he loses, but he's not going to lose. And we know
there's no possible way. There's no way. No universe where he could lose. In a race where he's favored by about 54% at this point, there's no possible way he could lose.
No, I mean that could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to win. That's what I'm saying. I think he's going to win. I know everything points to us taking back the Senate, and everything points to us increasing our majority in the House.
If he loses, if.
I'm not going to deal in hypotheticals. I'm focused on the next 8 days. I'm traveling to another state tomorrow to help the effort some more. That is what I'm focused on doing, is helping Republicans win, because I know that's good for the country. And frankly, Dan, this whole new coalition that's coming together, I mean, did you ever think you'd see Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. on the same team? They're on the same team because they see what the left's doing to the First Amendment. And don't think they won't come after you too. They'll come after you, and you're trying to be fair on both sides. And I know how News Nation is operating, but that's what's at stake in this election, is protecting the First Amendment and our free speech rights. So I'm doing everything I can to help Republicans, and I think we're going to win because America sees that.
All right. So you won't answer it directly. All right, but I hear you. Congressman Jim Jordan.
Yeah, so much wrong with all of that. Couple things off the top of my head. Again, Donald Trump could lose this election. It is statistically a coin flip. He could very well win. It's perilously close. It's dangerously close. As somebody who used to be confident that Vice President Harris was going to win, even though I recognize she could lose the election too, my confidence has declined. It is a genuine coin flip election. Jim Jordan was saying that Trump was going to win the 2020 election, and Trump lost the 2020 election. So Jim Jordan isn't much of a prophet, okay? He's saying the same things now that he did in 2020. In 2020, Donald Trump lost. Donald Trump did lose in 2020, and Jim Jordan actively aided and abetted Trump's schemes to steal the 2020 election. He was in contact with Donald Trump on January 6th. He was actually a material witness in the House January 6th Select Committee's investigation into the January 6th insurrection and Trump's schemes to stay in power. It was one of the reasons why then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi refused to permit Jim Jordan to serve on the House Select January 6th Committee, because he was one of the few Republicans who was under scrutiny for his involvement in Trump's plot. So Nancy Pelosi said to Kevin McCarthy, then the Republican leader, you can't have Jim Jordan on the committee. Replace him with somebody else. I'll grant you another name, but you can't have Jim Jordan. Kevin McCarthy declined. He pulled all of his names. And so the only Republicans who served on the House January 6th Select Committee were Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Jim Jordan famously became very cagey during interviews when people would ask him, hey, were you in contact with Donald Trump on January 6th? And he would filibuster for minutes at a time. He was so nervous about the prospect of, basically being implicated in this. He refused to comply with a subpoena, a lawfully issued subpoena issued by the January 6th Select Committee. So Jim Jordan has a very checkered history in this respect. So his prognostications with respect to elections and Donald Trump will win, that's really sinister. It's also stupid, but it's really sinister because it suggests that Jim Jordan is going to try to cheat to make it happen, which we've talked about in previous videos, what Republicans may or may not do. So all that's ridiculous. Then the end, where he's like, if we don't elect Republicans, the left might come after you, Dan Abrams and News Nation. What's interesting about that is Kamala Harris and President Biden have not threatened to pursue Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, News Nation, ABC, CBS, CNN, New York Times, anybody. There's been plenty of critical media about the Biden-Harris administration since Biden has stepped into power. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has repeatedly, as a candidate, as the president, and as a candidate again in 2024, repeatedly threatened to go after the media that he doesn't like. He's threatened to use the levers of government against CBS because he didn't like the 60 Minutes interview that they had with Vice President Harris. He's threatened to go after I almost said MSNDC is what he calls it, MSNBC, because he doesn't like their coverage of him. Donald Trump is the only candidate to do that, to threaten the First Amendment protections of the press. He's the one who refers to the press as the enemy of the people. Again, imagine after the Dominion voting system settlement, where Fox had to pay nearly $800 million because they knowingly signal boosted Donald Trump's 2020 election lies and defamed Dominion voting systems. Imagine if President Biden, who is the president, said, you know what? I'm going to go after Fox News because they're the enemy of the people. This Dominion voting system settlement proves it. They knowingly lied about the 2020 election to help Donald Trump, so they should be punished as a consequence. Imagine how Jim Jordan would react if President Biden did something like that. He'd be upset. But because it's Trump, and Trump is targeting left-wing liberal media, as Jim Jordan would call it, Jim Jordan doesn't care. So the Republicans have absolutely no objective record to stand on when it comes to First Amendment protections in the media. I'll also point out that when Trump was president, because Jim Jordan's a big fan of the Twitter files, right? This idea that, the three-letter agencies were corruptly pressuring social media companies to censor disinformation. When Donald Trump was president, his White House reached out to Twitter and tried to pressure them directly to take down a tweet by celebrity Chrissy Teigen, who referred to Donald Trump as a, quote, pussy-ass bitch. President Biden has never done anything like that. Vice President Harris has never done anything like that. So Jim Jordan's whole defense of Trump as a First Amendment absolutist and protector of free speech and the free press is categorically ridiculous, objectively inferior to the record of the Democrats, President Biden and Vice President Harris. And so this is pure cope coming from Jim Jordan. I think it says something. Now, Dan Abrams was frustrated here that Jim Jordan couldn't even answer the hypothetical and instead said, well, he'll concede like he did last time. Donald Trump never publicly or privately conceded the 2020 election and tried to sue his way into the White House. And when that didn't work, staged an insurrection to try to pressure Vice President Pence and Republican lawmakers to objecting to President Biden's victory. So just absolutely dishonest, categorically ridiculous stuff, typical of Jim Jordan. And it was interesting to see him being pressed on mainstream media about this. This is yet another reason why, in my opinion, we need to vote people like this out, because there is no room for Republican elected officials, in my opinion, in federal government. You can't trust them. Vote them all out, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments.